Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Ignite Somerset. It is February the 23rd, 2022. We missed the day with all the twos yesterday. That was an interesting one. And as usual this afternoon, we've had the usual exciting hiccups with technology. And I am really hoping that he's going to play ball with me this afternoon because I've been looking forward to this conversation so much for so long. Because we haven't just got one fabulous guest, this artist this afternoon to talk to. We've got two. We've got the fabulous Dr. Caroline Wilkins and we've got Leona Jones, who's joining us live from Cardiff. And we're going to be speaking with them in just a moment. But before we get to them, I'd just like to remind you that there's still an opportunity to inform our next programme of activity through the Ignite Somerset programme, which is supported by Arts Council England. I'll just put up the survey link now. Thank you to all of you who have already completed the survey. That will be really valuable information and we'll be taking that forward. So just time, I'll leave it up for a second so you've got time to grab a pen and just note that down if you're watching the live one. And of course, if you're watching this afterwards on YouTube, then you can press pause. Also, just a reminder that on March the 11th, we will be closing applications. This is for the Young People's Film Commissions. So there's an opportunity for 2 young people to make short films. We're looking for narrative fiction pieces. And each selected filmmaker will get a mentor support. You'll get access to equipment to make your film. And of course, you will get a budget to help you either to secure locations, bring in actors, etc., etc. So really exciting opportunity. And that has been supported by the BFI Southwest network that supports all the film academies in the Southwest. So there we go. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you, first of all, our guest who is just across the water to us. So say hello to Leona, who joins us from Cardiff. Hi, Leona.
Dad, great to be here.
Fantastic that you could join us today. The wonders of technology. See, sometimes it does pay dividends that you're able to join us. But also, and the reason that Leona is joining us from Cardiff is because she is collaborating with Somerset-based artist, Dr. Caroline Wilkins. Caroline, who is here with me in the studio at the engine room. Caroline, fantastic that you could be here in person.
Thank you.
Great that you are here this afternoon.
Thank you.
So, first of all, if we could just begin with your good self.
Yes.
So my first question is, and I'm going to slightly precede this because I'm asking this question because when I did research about you, the breadth of what you have done in your career. So how do you currently describe your practice and yourself as an artist today?
Well, actually now I've moved much more into academia. I write about work. I write about music, sound, theatre. I've become much more interested in that. Before I used to practice it, but now I'm into the theory of it. And that's what keeps me going. So occasionally I go to conferences, occasionally I publish stuff, academically. But that's my concern now. I'm not really a practitioner anymore.
But you say that because you still are certainly a contributing artist.
Yeah, I'm a contributing artist.
So of all the things that you've been involved in over the years, in terms of what we're about to talk about this afternoon,
sure.
What would you say your role as the artist is in this?
It's really in having generated a kind of text where Leona just took the text and played with it and made it into a sound piece, or she's making it into a sound piece with me. But that was really the jumping off point. It was really an academic text, with a sort of script in the middle of it. And she just said this could be a really good audio piece.
Well, before we get on to finding out more about that,
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about kind of your trajectory. You say that you're working in academia now, but go on, tell us where you started.
I started very much in music, as composing music, basically working very much in theatre, and thinking about sound in theatre. Also performing. I was performing a great deal, performing my own work or collaborating with other artists. And it just took me on a whole journey, going between disciplines, between music, between sound and theatre. And that's always been my love. But it took me years to combine those together. You know, it needs a lot of experience to do it.
Yeah, the layers of different understandings and approaches and things like
exactly,
that.
Yeah. Sure.
So you mentioned academia as being kind of the driver now for the work that you do. So is that about purely the research aspect, or is it about the subject matter of the research? What's the driver for you?
It's partly the research, but I'm looking very much at how the practice of theatre and of music and sound is changing because of technology, and the possibilities that technology opens up are simply amazing. That's my real inroad there.
Okay, so how technology is kind of opening up. Can you give me an example?
Well, I mean, the work I've done, for example, the way that new pieces of opera are being performed, like with very different technology in place, or theatre where you're using film as one of the performance elements. Sound, which is becoming a real protagonist in a theatre piece, and not just accompanying a theatre piece. You know?
Yeah,
it's actually there as an actor. Yeah, which is fantastic.
Very much so. And you met Leona through the Performance Philosophy Biennial held in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about that event and what took you to participate in it?
Yeah, we're both members of the Performance Philosophy Network, which is kind of looking at what is performance. It's a much wider thing. It crosses all the disciplines. It's not just music performance. It's not just being an actor. And we both wanted to go to Amsterdam, so we decided we'd have something to show, and that we'd actually intervene in each other's pieces.
So did you? So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So did you plan that in advance then? Okay.
Sure, we did. Yeah, we had a strategy there.
Okay.
So Leona intervened in my piece from the audience, and I did the same with her piece.
And how did the other audience react to that?
They were really surprised. But I mean, that was part of the thing. We could do that. Not many people took it up, but we actually did it. And we didn't tell people before.
Okay.
It just happened.
So when you say you took it up, was that an offer from the organisers of?
Yes, they said, because the whole conference was about intervention and just how performance can intervene and how people can intervene in each other's presentations. How we need to get rid of these barriers between presentation, full stop, presentation, like a concert.
Yeah, okay.
Just to overlap them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you ever explored that? Have you ever explored that possibility with an audience that's not, researchers, where that offer? So if you think about performance and performers in terms of responding to an audience, not just questions, but in terms of the timing of the laughter, or when something goes wrong, a sound effect that goes wrong, but where because you often see, don't you, with comedians, for example, whereby they'll have a certain approach to dealing with unexpected interjections from the audience. But have you ever experienced it whereby you've sort of created a piece of work that's relied on the interjection of your audience.
No, but that's something I'd love to do. It'd be fantastic. I mean, I think that's really important, that the audience become performers, that we cross over.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm all for audiences being close too. Proximity is really important, I think.
Okay.
Actually.
Because of the intimacy that it creates.
The energy. You can feel the energy exchange much more when you're performing, and it's lovely. Or when you're delivering something, whatever, a paper, you can feel the audience responding.
Yeah.
And you can feel when they're really dying to say something or coming with something. Okay. Yeah.
So this was already set up with Leona in advance.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so how did you two meet?
Actually, I gave a talk at Spike Island in Bristol on kind of aspects of my work, and we met afterwards. Yeah, that was the trigger point. Actually, yeah.
Fantastic. So obviously, as mentioned, we've got Leona here with us, who's in Cardiff. And Leona, apologies, obviously dying to talk to you too. So, but just for a few minutes longer, if I can just continue with Caroline. So Caroline, tell me a little bit more about the piece that you're working on now with Leona.
Sure. It's based on something I wrote, which is really looking at eavesdropping, the whole history of eavesdropping.
Was this part of your PhD?
No. It was in response to something that somebody else wrote.
Oh, okay.
And I found it so fascinating. I thought, well, actually, I know something about this because I researched early forms of eavesdropping. In the 1600s, these kind of incredible shells that amplified, that took a sound out of a room to somewhere else, so somebody could hear what people were saying. And I was so fascinated by this. I did a whole lot of research. Like in the plays of Shakespeare, there are a lot of scenes of eavesdropping, people listening in on what's going on. The most famous being Polonius behind the curtain,
in Hamlet.
Who gets stabbed, and that prompted a script, a kind of imaginary script where I thought, okay, there's all these characters in the labyrinth, and they're listening in on each other, and they're from different times. Okay. And Leona jumped at that when I showed it to her, and said we could make an audio piece of that, I started experimenting with some audio of myself. I recorded myself playing some of the characters that actually come up in my script. I mean, we can hear an example if you like.
Yeah, fantastic.
You'll see a picture of this incredible amplifier that brings the kind of shell-like thing that actually takes the sound from the courtyard into through a statue. So somebody's listening through the statue.
Before we listen to the piece, can I just ask? So what would the motivation? You said that you've sort of explored this history of eavesdropping. But what were the motivations behind those kinds of early forms of eavesdropping?
Basically power. Finding out what people were saying in the courtroom or the hall, the courtyard. And also just experimenting, with something that's kind of otherworldly. People didn't know where it was, how you could know these sounds. And there's a whole museum where, if you passed by the statues were speaking because they were actually just. Sound was coming through their mouths.
They were funneling the sound through. Wow.
From this spiral shell. So you thought the statue was speaking. It's very scary.
Yeah, I bet.
Walking past.
Yeah.
Talking statues.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking heads.
And kind of, I suppose, an early form of magical illusion,
well,
really.
Yeah, there's this element of magic. Because in the 1600s, people were very, obviously, superstitious and very aware of the gods, and you know, but it was used as a power thing as well.
Okay.
Surveillance.
Should we listen to?
Yeah, listen to the courtiers.
So this is the piece public in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They realise they're being listened to.
Okay, let's have a listen to this one then.
Sure.
We were caught in the act, but not all of our conversations were intended, eavesdropper. We were powerless victims of you. However, the museum gave us another role. There, we were anonymous voices, and taken for omnipotent beings carrying messages from God. Only our inventor knew of us.
So tell us. Tell us again where that piece is from.
That's actually I recorded my own voice there as the courtiers, and that's a picture of this courtyard with the system that was invented by someone called Kirche, where he's actually listening to what they're saying.
Amazing.
So I imagine what the courtiers would say, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, we're caught in the act. Help. Yeah. And then we have let's have the talking statue. This is the talking statue. And she's actually saying what her role is.
So is this the talking
Yeah.
bust?
Talking bust.
Okay, thank you.
My mouth is an echo chamber of thoughts. They bounce off the inner walls of my hollow metal cavity. You think, perhaps, that they are coming from a divine presence, as if I represented a messenger, a medium of God, lined up with my companions along the wall of this museum entrance. On the other hand, my presence is ambiguous in that courtly setting. No one would suspect its double role. My mouth and ears are one long tunnel that bores through the cavities of this building in a spiral formation and reaches the surface of a wall below. I have no control over what I hear and tell when you approach me, eavesdropper. I involuntarily eavesdrop on you, performers, in your courtyard, transmitting your voices through my empty vehicle to you, eavesdropper. You pass before me in the room upstairs, in the museum entrance, perhaps not knowing that I can speak. Listen. Come nearer.
There she is. And perhaps we can show the image of the museum. She's just talking about the museum.
Yeah.
And the statues, one after the other.
Wow.
There it is, yeah.
So, I mean, there were, obviously, we've got the Whispering Gallery in St Paul's Cathedral, haven't we? Are there other examples, like UK kind of examples of this?
Yes, there are, and they're natural caves which give them the most incredible echo, and that actually give back what you say. Yeah. And so, like the listening caves, I think there's one in they're all over the world. These incredible formations. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, in the material that you when you kind of first told me about the piece that you were working on, you talk about so the piece is called "With Ringing Ears."
That's right.
With ringing ears. So And you begin with a line which is a response, and it says, during global reactions to pandemic, the rush online has substituted so much previously gained from live gatherings and individual life situations. So did this, for you, was the starting point of it?
Yes.
You know, during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's where Leona came in, because she said this is contemporary. It's not just historical.
Yeah.
We are overloaded with information. Our ears are ringing all the time, particularly during the last 2 years when we've just been forced so much information and misinformation of all kinds throughout the pandemic. And so the title is with ringing, as in ringing ears, but also ringing with the W, to ring out. Like you have to ring out your ears and get rid of some of this stuff because you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So that's really where Leona said, this has significance now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, let's bring Leona in. But Leona, before we continue sort of talking about you know, about this piece that you're working on, perhaps you'd be so kind as to just sort of describe your practice as an artist.
Yeah, it's one of these things that I always find quite difficult. So what I usually say is work words and sounds and spaces, because those are the things that give me the buzz that start off projects. Words have always been there. It's, you know, something I've had an innate love of the written word and the spoken word for as long as I can remember. And that's become sounds. And also then it moved into spaces as I started to realize how sound and movement and time all work together. And the space that they inhabit is very often a very important catalyst for some of my projects.
Do you think that has anything to do with your cultural heritage, as you know, because the Welsh people, in terms of the beauty of the accent and the singing and you know, the poetry and all the written word that kind of comes out. Were you aware of that growing up? Has that been part of the sort of richness of what's informed, you know, how you work today?
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head there. I'm not a Welsh speaker, native Welsh speaker. My father wasn't allowed to speak Welsh. His mother was a native Welsh speaker, and she didn't allow her 4 sons to speak the language at that time. The political propaganda basically was that the Welsh language would hold people back. So she
Right.
was actually thinking that she was benefiting her sons to stop them speaking Welsh and just to speak English. And therefore myself and my brother couldn't speak well at all. But I grew up in an environment where the older people all spoke Welsh and the younger people didn't. And I was very, very aware of the 2 different languages. But not just that, because I was brought up in an English-speaking household, I was also aware of the different types of English that go on. I mean, you didn't speak to a teacher in the school in the same way as you talked to the other kids on the street. You know, there were different ways of using
Yeah.
English as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the written word is something completely different again, depending on who's writing it. So yes, I would say yes. That's very much you know, it's a very insightful thing that you just said. It's been there from the beginning, and I've always thought of language as music, basically. You
Yeah.
know, the rhythms and the way that everybody speaks. And if you listen to a language where you don't understand a single word of it, and you can just listen to the sound, it's an absolutely lovely experience. You don't have to worry about meaning. You just listen and then just sort of dive into the sound of the what people are saying. And of course, the sound of the voice, the timbre of the voice comes across then as well, much more than when you're thinking about meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And I would just say that if anybody would like to listen to some of your work, you've got some fabulous examples on your website, and I will put the link to the website in the description for this later. And I particularly saw, mainly because we've been there recently to do a live stream, that you were the artist in residence at the Museum of Bath at Work, and there is a beautiful piece on your website that you created for that. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just a lovely, lovely project to work on. I was in Bath and I was actually heading to a different museum, but I saw on the map there was Museum of Bath at Work, and I knew nothing about it. And I thought, oh, I'll just call in there before I go to the other one. And I went in there and it just blew my mind. I mean, if anybody has been to Bath, please do go to it. It's just amazing. Basically, they've reconstructed a very old shop that used to inhabit a street a few streets away from where it is now. And it's a hardware shop and an ironmonger's, and it's just extraordinary. And I'd heard they had a massive selection of oral history in their archives. And I basically said, this is a gold mine, absolute gold. Please, please, can I do some work on it? So, I mean, love of them. They said yes, they would be delighted for me to work on it. So what I did was create a soundscape that was actually played within the main gallery of the museum. It wasn't through headphones, it wasn't through a listening post, anything like that. It actually inhabited the museum itself. So I used the oral archives and these people, you know, the voices of what people were saying, they just needed to be heard, absolutely. But I also recorded sounds from the museum and created an abstract soundscape to go with the voices. So the whole thing came out of that lovely museum. It was just a joy to work. Yeah.
I loved how you played with the phrasing and the you know, the sort of the repeating, the rhythm of the words. It's a really lovely piece, and it's great that it's you know, kind of on your site so that people can go back and hear it. Also on your website, you talk about, it says, one of the cornerstones of Leona's practice is collaboration across disciplines and media. So what was your starting point for this collaboration with Caroline, particularly given that it started in the middle of a pandemic?
Yes, well, Caroline said we met a few years ago after she'd done a talk, and the piece that she was talking about was, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. It used technology, it used the body, it used the voice, and I just found it so exciting. I went up to say to her afterwards how much I'd enjoyed the talk. And just so happened there was a group of us going out for a meal, and so we were able to carry on the conversation during the meal afterwards. And we just discovered we had so many common grounds in the way that we thought about sound and the way that we thought about technology as well, because neither of us are people that believe technology is the, you know, ultimate holy grail of human achievement. We both have questions around technology, as well as being very, very happy that we live at a time where it's done, so we can actually create the work. Because although Caroline has said that, you know, she's now mainly, well, she is an academic, her performative work, which I've been lucky enough to experience a couple of times, was just extraordinary. It's very experimental, and it made me want to know more, made me want to hear more, and made me want to see more. So we kept in touch, basically. And then as lockdown sort of made us not able to meet up in real life, and also made work slow down incredibly to the point of a glacier going through a valley, we had enough time to be able to say, let's try and do something together. In which that was the point that Caroline showed me her academic text. And I just thought, yeah, this is the time to do this. We both got space in our diaries. We can have a go at it and see what happens. And that's basically where it's come from. It's something that we've wanted to do for a while, was work together. And we did it in Amsterdam in one particular way, but we wanted to work more closely together on an original project that we were both involved in as well. And that's where In Years has come in.
I must just, whilst on the subject of Amsterdam, I must just bring up this fantastic photograph. You can see it just over there, Caroline, of Caroline.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about what's taking place here.
Well, I did a piece for the conference, which was based entirely on human voice. And I made a very abstract soundscape around it. And I played it to her before we went over there. And I said, I think you can do something with this. And she could, of course she could, she did. So during the conference, my piece was played. And then after we'd done some talking, whatever, Caroline stood up and started making some incredible verbal reactions to it, and in the end led everybody that was within that part of the conference out into an atrium where she did this amazing performance on stairs using sounds that she had picked out of my soundscape, and created a live soundscape using her voice and that instrument that she's holding.
Fantastic.
It was a very, very memorable time. It took people by surprise, which was fantastic, because at one point everybody was sort of looking at each other thinking, what's this mad woman doing? So I thought I was already there waiting for that reaction. So I said, I think we should follow her.
So
And people did.
Have we got a bit of it here? I think we have, haven't we? Is it the Fragmanin excerpt? Is that the piece?
That's the part. That's my soundscape. A part of the soundscape.
That's part of your soundscape.
The joy of Caroline's intervention was that it happened in a moment and it wasn't recorded. I mean, there's a couple of still images I managed to take while it was happening are all the documentation that exists. And as part of us thinks that's absolutely right at times, this mad dash to document everything. Let's just say something happened for the people that were there that can be gone back on and rewound and watched again or listened to again. It's just there. It was there for them.
Well, I'm really conscious as we're kind of sat here in the engine room that obviously we've got Daniel Birch with us. He's a composer. We've got Jonathan Peckover, who's an animator. He's here in the audience. We've got Paris and we've got Ben, who are both art students here in the room. And I'm just conscious that, again, with this technology, that in some ways, we are we're here talking to Leona online. We know that we're broadcasting out by YouTube, but we've also got kind of people in the room, and that it can in itself kind of create these barriers to kind of conversation. So what were the technical questions that kind of you're asking at the moment, Caroline?
Technical questions. With regard to the piece?
Yeah.
We really we want to really involve the audience in the sense that we want to create a space where the sounds are coming from different parts of the space. Ultimately, an 8-channel work would be great, and the audience are really finding themselves through those sounds in the space.
So a technical question now for you, Leona. Why? So the piece, I know the piece that you did in the Museum of Bath at Work was a 2-channel piece. So can you just explain what the difference is and why you want to do an 8-channel piece for this?
Yeah. The museum piece was actually an 8-channel piece as well.
Oh, that was 8-channel.
Because it's about getting sound to move through space, and it's not something that we do often. It's been done on a couple of classical compositions. Caroline will know a lot more about this, but it was Stockhausen actually went a shuttle, like on a weaving a shuttle across the stage in one. I'm sure it was him that in one of his pieces. At the sound of the shuttle on a loom, whooshing across the stage as part of the composition. So it's not a new thing, but technology is allowing us to do it. But it just excites me that sound can come from different places. Some come from unexpected places, and we're not used to that. We know, when you've got earbuds in, it's right in your head. But actually, sound is an embodied thing that happens all around us. It doesn't just go in through your ears, it goes through in from every part of you. So I guess that's really why I want to do the 8-channel works and really get more experience with them. And the thing with the museum, where there was 4 channels that played the ambient soundscape, and that like the bedrock of the piece.
Okay.
And then there were 4 channels that were used for voices. And the speakers were spread out throughout the main gallery. They weren't all bunched together. So the voices came from different directions, you know, and they would bounce around with each other.
And
but the piece that we're working on at the moment, we're hoping that that will become much more complex. And, you know, maybe we can push it further, but that's experiments to come.
and so, Caroline, are you thinking that those different channels, they're in the same way as the kind of the pipes all came from different places and went? Is that what you're trying to recreate?
Yes.
Are you thinking of taking live sound from in the space itself? Is that?
Oh gosh, no, we haven't got that far yet, but why not?
Yeah, well, that's I was wondering whether you might be able to
wow.
relay as people come in and experience the
Sure,
space
sure.
and kind of do that. Think of what you know, where's the sign, where's the seats, where you know, where's
Right.
I'm just going to the top, you know, that thing that we all do when we get, whether that might also then form part of it in a sense.
That's brilliant. I love that.
You can credit me later. It'll be fine.
Super.
Okay.
This is the lovely thing about being at a project up this stage, is that the world's our oysters, really. And,
Okay.
It becomes limited only by what we can learn to do with technology and the spaces that are involved, and you know, what we can actually physically manage to do.
Yeah. So in terms of the text, let's just come back, if we can come back to that. So
sure.
what's the basis of the text that you're using?
Well, they're all different characters, really. But what Leona has done is make them much more abstract. So they're sounds, they're not just words. And she's really compressed the text enormously. It's not a narrative anymore. It's kind of key sounds that belong to each character.
Okay.
That reappears through, and you know, the characters are listening to each other. Hence the idea of the 8 channels, you know, so that we can kind of distribute the characters in the space. Yeah.
We've got a couple of examples that we could listen to. Yeah. Which one shall I play? Shall I just play the first excerpt and then you can tell us about it? Here we go.
Eaves. Drip, 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 drop. Eaves. Drop. Eavesdrop. Eavesdropper. Taste. Space. Leave. Trace. Mouth. Pass on, 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 pass on. Endless circles of cycles. Circles of cycles of 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 now. Row after row after row after row after row after row. Listen in. Thoughts in mind's ears.
Yeah, that's one little sample there. It's playing along with the sound of the words in onomatopoeia, and just it's going from meaning to something else entirely. Just the pure sound of the word.
Almost like Chinese whispers in a sense that, you know, the meaning of it can be twisted because it hasn't been carried completely properly by whoever is kind of, you know, taking the message forward, that sort of thing.
That's right.
How are you going to distinguish between the different characters, or does that not matter, do you think?
I think that will come through.
Okay.
They all have slightly different timbres of voice, because obviously Leona's processing the sound.
Right.
So changing the pitch sometimes, the quality, the texture,
Okay.
So they will be identifiable.
And is that completely open to Leona's interpretation? Are you sending any kind of like notes, background about the characters and that sort of thing?
Okay. We'll be doing that more. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's very much about the process at the moment, isn't it? We're trying to work out the process of how to take something that was written in sentences as a narrative, how to break it down, how to play with the sounds when we break it down further, how to layer the sounds. So we're doing, sketches is probably the best way to describe it. We're playing with sketches at the moment. It's not the full piece by any means whatsoever, but it's working towards what the possibilities are, and more possibilities will open up the more that we work on it together, because that's the way it happens. That's why, you know, when you collaborate, you're bouncing off each other, and things will arise that perhaps an individual wouldn't have thought of, because it's a combination of 2, 3, 4 minds working together.
And how much will where you eventually show the work kind of influence or shape it? Because this isn't necessarily a site-specific piece in the sense of that you are making it for a particular space, and like you've done with the museum, Leona. So this isn't site-specific in that sense, but wherever you put it, there is always the potential for, I guess, audio pollution in the same way as we get light pollution. So how much have you thought about that in terms of where that final piece will be kind of sited and how it might influence the work? Has that come into your thought so far?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think, you know, from experiences in the past where I've done work that have been cited, because a lot of my work isn't in sort of the white box art galleries. And even if it is, box art galleries aren't actually very geared up to sound. So there's always sound bleed, whether that's from the cafe, whether it's from the reception area, or just walking around. It happens. So I think really with a piece like this, we can embrace it, because the sound that goes on within each space it's part of that space, and our sounds also have to be part of the space. And so myself, I don't feel too just about it. I think it's right that things can come in. I mean, the idea of bringing in the live sounds of the pieces you mentioned earlier on is wonderful. If we work out how to do that on a technological point of view, I would be thinking that, yes, that's fantastic. Because all we have to do is disconnect it, you know, just put a bit of delay in it so the sounds aren't actually happening at the same time, perhaps. And that would add eeriness, because if somebody recognised their own voice, you know, but we'd have to think about that sort of thing. But it's also the physical space. I mean, if there are little cubby holes, or whether it's a long string, you know, a long corridor like the rows of statues were stood in, you know, you can adapt. You need a space, I think, in time, when you're working on a sound installation, to actually explore the space that the sound installation is going to inhabit. That has to be built into the process as well. And now sometimes what that means is you have to do a bit of remixing, because perhaps the space is a lot more boomy than you were expecting. or maybe there's just too much sound coming in from outside, and you relook at it, you don't know. It's one of the joys of playing with sound, really, is that it is much more of an unknown than a lot of the other media.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel at the moment we're still keeping our minds open as much as possible in how we're going to be doing this.
Yeah. So Caroline, I mean, just thinking about that, that's definitely something that you could explore through an Ignite Artist Surgery. And I've certainly seen in the past we've used, so there's a piece of software called, Daniel, you might be familiar with this, a piece of software called Isadora, where it's often used in sort of visual kind of mixing, and you can put all kinds of delay effects and that sort of thing on. But I would have thought that would be very easy to do with a microphone. And I know that in Isadora you can even use it so that, for example, if there's a sound in the room and it's over a certain decibel, it can trigger. You can program it to trigger things. So.
Yeah, Richard introduced me to that.
Yeah.
I've completely not investigated it since, really, but yeah, it's definitely a lot of scope using that in a live environment.
Yeah, but of course, I guess the thing that you need to play with then is that idea of when you're crafting your other sounds and the timings of your other sounds, you know, will it kind of interfere, you know, or does it kind of add something to it? But yeah, that's certainly something you could explore through that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I have worked with dancers and Isadora with a sound artist, so I'm aware of the visual aspects of it more. Yeah, this was quite some time ago, but in a lab.
Yeah,
I remember working with Isadora. Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess there's the thinking it through my head, that whole thing of, you know, the sound loop that you might get, or you know, trying to avoid that aspect. But it might be that even if you picked up sound from, say, the cafe, another part of the building, and filtered it through, you know, the sort of the telephone calls that are happening in the office, or you know, something else that you might be able to. It's definitely something to kind of play with, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. That sounds really, really exciting. Yeah, because I'm a late starter in this. I haven't done this all of my life. I've had careers in other fields, and so I'm still learning so much about what technology can do. And you know, this station just it's so exciting. Thank you very much.
Caroline, I wanted to ask. So, and I think we sort of mentioned this the other day when we were talking about the idea of when you bring an audience into a space, and how do you think you're going to encourage people to listen? How do you think you might approach that when you're using a space? Well, because in your previous work, you've got the physicality of you in the space, haven't you? You know, and the performance element where, you know, you kind of, your physicality commands the space before you've even sort of made a sound necessarily. But how do you think you might, what's the difference with this one, and how might you approach it?
I think it's very important to create an ambience where people can listen. The main element is the light, to bring the light down. Possibly to have points of light, if anything. That's one interesting way. So that people are immediately feel that they're in a bit of a cocoon.
Okay.
A dimmed cocoon. They can still see each other, move around. But it's very important that they realise they can hear behind, all around them. That's one way of doing it. Because light is very distractive, you know. The visual is very distractive, and you can't really totally black out because people freak out. I've been in performances of acousmatic music where the audience sit in a circle. They've got their backs to each other in the middle, so they're facing outwards, and the only way it worked was that there were little points of light, so that they could actually focus on during the piece. But of course, yeah, it's quite scary actually. If you totally black out.
Yeah.
Space, you can't really do that.
And I guess you want to invite people into this. It's that drawing them through, isn't it?
Yeah, and you want them to be able to move. If that's, I mean, in our case, I think we do.
Yeah.
So they can approach a speaker and then go to another speaker, and just feel free to move and to feel the difference in sound when you move from one to the other. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about Oliver Eliasson's piece, The Sun in the Turbine Hall, where actually everybody was kind of lying on the floor and you felt like you were bathing in the sun, but actually you were bathing in the sound really, weren't you?
That's true. Yeah. That's a very interesting comparison.
Yeah. So it's a tricky balance.
Tricky to get it right because you know, the human body's in space. You've got to acknowledge that. How do you organise the space? Yeah.
And you were saying about the bombardment of things. Yeah.
Info. Yeah.
So kind of taking people into an environment where you somehow reduce those. Is that the intention, to reduce the other stimulations, or?
Yes, it's just to question them really. So you know, and particularly like the social media bombardment that we got. Yeah. All that stuff. And so people really can think about what they're listening to. What they want to listen to.
So we've got. Should we listen to another piece?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So let's listen to this next excerpt.
Wrong.
Like you, object beings, with your material memories, that I'm helpless to intervene, not possessing on not
As if I represented a messenger, a medium of God, lined up with my companions along the wall of this museum entrance.
All along, listening. The
Our one long tunnel that poured through the cavities of this building in a spiral formation
from the despair
and reaches the surface.
That's there's lots going on in that.
There are about 4 or 5 characters in there.
Yeah.
All and they're all listening to each other and bouncing up each other.
And so the channels will be in different places.
Yes.
Sorry, we got a question, Jonathan.
Great.
You wanted to ask something.
I was wondering actually, from the perspective of maybe someone that can't shut out sound. Honestly, from perspective of hearing, from a specific point, but hearing that this will be performed from multiple points. I mean, what sort of, I don't know, are you playing on certain levels of volume for each different sort of point?
Yes, and of course the timbre of the voice affects the volume. So that'll be very carefully balanced. So you don't absolutely have to hear everything at the same time. It's like some take priority, some go into the background. Yeah, very much like a perspective, a visual perspective. Yeah.
And might it be almost like an orchestral work, in that at times there'll be maybe one voice or just the ambient sound and it crescends, or
yes, that's a possibility. Yeah,
possibility.
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah. That's right. So that certain textures come through and others recede. So there's not a tutti all the time. That's no. There's not everything together all the time.
Okay.
Tutti or whatever.
Okay.
In orchestral tutti, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's a really interesting point, Jonathan, about how overwhelmed people could feel with those sounds.
Yes, that's bombardment. Yeah, sure.
Really, like you were saying, obviously, this might be performed. You'd be taking the acoustics of the space in question into consideration.
Yes, very, very much so. Yeah, in a live situation, you mean, or yes, of course. Then you use your own hearing, but here it has to be very carefully monitored according to the acoustics of the space. Yeah.
And I wonder about, because it's not a performance.
No.
So that idea of then how long someone might kind of wait and experience. You know.
Sure.
Yeah, it's going to be
that's why not? I mean, people come and go in installations very often.
Yeah.
Well, they come back in if they hear something.
Yeah. And I guess again, just thinking about the kind of space that you might put it in. A long corridor sounds great, doesn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
You know. Yeah. Just that, you know, thinking about what you were saying about the busts along the way and
the
whether
talking statues.
Yeah. I was just thinking about Oliver Elyson's exhibition at the Tate, where there's I think there's a piece called Blind Passageway,
right?
Which is it's kind of filled with like smoke, like from a smoke machine, but as you go through it changes colour, and you can only see, I think it's like about 2 foot in front of you.
Yes.
And you think you're going through this absolutely massive space, but actually, and we came out the other side and we immediately were like, oh, we've got to go and experience that again and run again to do it again. But whether you might think of,
that's interesting,
that sort of travelling through, but whether that, so many
from
things.
A to B. Yeah, that's interesting you say that. So there is a way through.
Yeah. Because in some way that's that timing of that journey as you pass through, isn't it? And you can slow it down.
Yes.
But equally, you know, when you're at the end, because are you thinking that this piece might be on loop? Is that?
Oh yes, it would be eventually on loop. But that ties in very nicely with the idea of the labyrinth, because that's the whole thing that triggered the piece off. You know, this labyrinth of voices where people are listening into another voice. Yeah. Sure.
It also slightly reminds me of that thing that when someone passes away, that the hearing is the last thing to go, isn't it? It's fascinating. That's really interesting.
Yes.
And again,
it's the first sense, as far as we're aware, that comes as well.
Is that?
Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I mean, you've got more to kind of explore together,
Sure.
So is that all via Zoom and email, and is that the sort of the platforms for your collaboration, as it were?
No, we do sometimes actually visit each other.
You do. When lockdown's allowed, yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
Bristol is a very useful place for us, isn't it? We
Bristol
often meet up somewhere in Bristol. Yeah.
This is a meeting point. Yeah, where we discuss.
All the ley lines go to Bristol.
Cardiff, Bridgewater, Bristol.
So what's the next step for you working on these pieces?
Oh goodness! Wow. I suppose just collating all the new ideas and thinking about do we need to, what kind of new material do we need to record? Recording sessions, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at what point do you stop? I was watching, I don't know if anybody else watched it, Imagine, not Imagination. Imagine on BBC One with Alan Yentop. And he was interviewing the dancer Wayne McGregor, and he talked about how, because obviously that's driven by programming in the piece, and then it's on stage, and he used the words, he said that he kind of abandons it. He feels like he has to abandon it, Is that, how do you feel when you're working on a piece? Is there a moment when you know, no, that's it, it's done and it's ready now to be seen?
Yes, I think those moments of leaving it alone are very important, because you need to re-listen a while later, and it's a new piece then, and your ears are fresh. It's very important. You've had a new experience, and you come to it freshly. So yeah, what Wayne says is absolutely correct. Yeah, sure. But I think there is a point in collaboration where you feel, yes, I think we've got it. I think it's there.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, pragmatically, it's if you have a date where the piece is going to be presented in public. Be solidified to a certain extent, but of course, that then feeds into development, whether it's a development of the piece itself, or whether it triggers something for a new project. It's all a continual feedback situation, really. You start off with something and then present it, and that gives feedback to the next thing. You're never doing something that lives on its own. It always comes from what's happened before and what's going to happen in the future.
That's very true. So we were hoping that this is going to come, if not here, to a venue, certainly in Somerset. When do you think that might be? Not wanting to rush you
No.
or put a, but when do you think we might?
I think it'll be next summer.
Next summer.
Next summer.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. We look forward to that, Leona and Caroline. So.
That is not this summer.
Not this summer, no.
In a year's time.
Yeah. Well, hopefully our audiences as well, and I mean audiences in general, in the same way as we've got a few people here tonight and we're returning to more kind of face-to-face activity.
Yeah, sure.
Don't want to speak too soon because I did say earlier about, I said something about, 10 minutes, it's time for another technical problem to happen, and then the whole thing crashed. So I am saying nothing about what might happen in terms of viruses and various other kind of things, because not that I think I'm that all-powerful, like it's all down to me or anything, but don't want to tempt fate, certainly not. So Leona, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, and thank you, Caroline, for making us aware of this work that you're doing and this kind of next step in what. Just reading about all the things that you've done, so fantastic that we might get an opportunity as well to kind of benefit from all of your experience and to see, hear your work here in Somerset. It's going to be wonderful. We are now about to enjoy a workshop with the fabulous composer, a sound artist, Daniel Birch. So just to say to everybody who is watching us out there in YouTube land, thank you so much for joining us. We are now going to have a little workshop where we're exploring mindful sounds to help us with our mindful approach to living and our mental well-being. But just to say that the next Creative Network is coming up at the end of March. I think I've got something here with the date. Yes, there you go. So our next Creative Network is on March 30th. It'll be another hybrid event. So we will be here at the Engine Room studio. So come and be part of the audience and meet the artists themselves. But also to say that if you are, in a rural place and have difficulty getting to us, then you can join us online too. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much for joining us.